None ever wise. Rabbi Yitzchak Ginzburgh.
This evening, the topic that we're going to speak about is the visions of redemption, which is actually the topic that the whole series of lectures is based upon. In Hebrew, the word for vision is chazon. As the beginning of the prophet Isaiah, the book begins with the word chazon, a vision. Isaiah is the prophet of salvation, of consolation. Nonetheless, the vision that he begins with is not such a good vision on Big Shot. It's the vision, the sad vision of the state, the poor state of the Jewish people at that time. Just later on, in the later chapters of Isaiah, especially from chapter 40 on, we begin the salvation and the consolation of Isaiah. But the whole book begins with the word chazon. The first chapter of Chazon is actually read as the Haftarah before Tisha B'Av, before the day of the destruction of the temple. Both temples, the first temple and the second temple. There's a famous word of Rabbi Yitzchak, who says that even though the Shabbat before the destruction, the commemoration of the destruction is a sad Shabbat. Every Shabbat is a day of pleasure, a day of joy and happiness. Nonetheless, there are even certain things that are done in the synagogue and other places to commemorate the coming of the Tisha B'Av, the day of destruction. Nonetheless, the Shabbat is called Shabbat Chazon, the Shabbat of vision, meaning that the Haftarah that is read on that Shabbat is the Chazon Yeshayahu Ben Amos, the beginning of Isaiah. And Rabbi teaches that means that every Jew, even though the destruction is forthcoming, as it were, every Jew receives on that Shabbat a vision in his heart, in the inner eye of his soul, a vision of the redemption, a vision of the third temple as it will stand. Meaning that before we commemorate, before we relive every commemoration in the Torah is a reliving of something that took place once. Before the reliving of the destruction, the Shabbat before, every Jew at some level of his consciousness, whether revealed or concealed, becomes aware of redemption and of the building of the third temple, and actually sees, has a vision of the third temple as it will stand in a state of eternity. This is like Chazal say that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is always makdim before ala makah. Hashem always precedes healing before some disease or some makah, some smiting. In the Zohar, in the Tikkun Zohar, the Jewish souls are categorized into 10 different categories, corresponding to the 10 Sefirot. We know in Kabbalah there are 10 different levels of consciousness in the soul: Keter, Chokhmah, Binah. The 3 higher Sefirot, and there's Chesed, Gvura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yisod, Malchut. Each one of these different Sefirot has a soul type, a prototype of a Jewish soul that corresponds to that particular Sefirah. The souls that correspond to the Keter is super consciousness. Also they're called Roshei Alfei Yisrael, the heads of the thousands of Israel. The souls that correspond to Chokhmah, Chachamim, those that correspond to Binah, understanding, called Gibonim, those that correspond to Chesed, kindness, are called Chasidim, Vurah, called Giborim, those that correspond to Tiferet are called Marei Torah, the masters of the Torah. Torah has to do with Tiferet, beauty. Now this I just said in short. Those that correspond to Netzach, the two Sefirot, which are often the two most subtle and sublime Sefirot, to understand their significance and their task in the workings of the soul, are the two Sefirot that are called Netzach and Hod, which correspond either to the two kidneys in the body or the two legs. These two Sefirot, for some reason, or most of the other Sefirot, the whole category that corresponds to them, it's more or less obvious, clear, why that type of soul corresponds to that Sefirah. But in these two Sefirot, the soul category that corresponds to them are called Nevi'im and Chozim, prophets and seers. And that everything that has to do with vision or prophecy in the soul corresponds to one of these two Sefirot, one of the two legs, or one of the two kidneys. As our teachers, the two kidneys give counsel to the soul as to how to bring about things, to bring from potential to a state of actualization, to actualize one's potential. The counsel in the soul how to actualize, or how to realize oneself. Before mamash, that counsel comes from the kidneys. Just like the legs are in order to walk. Walk is to how to proceed towards a given goal, how to achieve before mamash, in actual reality, a given goal. So these two Sefirot, Netzach and Hod, for some reason, or now maybe you begin to feel it a little bit, correspond to prophecy. Just there are two different categories of prophecy. Those that are called actual prophets, those souls correspond to Netzach, the right leg, the right kidney. Whereas those souls that are called Chozim, that's this word that we're now beginning to try to discuss, to try to understand the concept of vision. Especially like the vision of the redemption that is even precedes the destruction, or the commemoration of the destruction. That vision, that word for vision, chazon, corresponds to the left kidney, or the left leg in the body. And as the name of the Sefirah, of that divine luminance, light, or consciousness in the soul, is called Hod. Hod either means splendor, or it means thanksgiving, or acknowledgement. Afterwards, if we already mentioned and went through all of the Sefirot, so we'll say that the last two Sefirot, those souls that correspond to Yisod, foundation, are called the Tzadikim of the generation, of every generation. There are Lamed Vav, 36 Tzadikim in every generation. Those souls that correspond to Malchut, the last Sefirot are called the Malachim, the kings, the physical leaders of the generation. So once more, every one of the 10 Sefirot has some soul type that corresponds to it. And since now, this evening, we're going to discuss the idea of vision, and how every Jew should have in his heart, even in bad times, even in times that appear to be bad, sometimes really, or specifically, explicitly, before those bad times, then he gets the true vision of redemption, of the good that will be. So that concept of chazon, of vision, has to do with the Sefirah of Hod. Once more, Hod means splendor, or thanksgiving, acknowledgement. The chozim b'hod. So now let's try to understand a little bit more this word, chazon, vision. There's a famous verse that's often quoted in the Chassidut that says, "Mibsari echezeh Eloka." From my own flesh do I envision divinity, God Himself. The explanation is that since man is created in the image of God, Atem Kurim Adam, man refers to the Jewish people, the Jewish soul. The Jew are called man. So a person can meditate and examine his own soul, or his own body, his own flesh. And from examining and meditating about his own flesh, upon his own flesh, he can in some way conceive of and comprehend the secret of divinity, the creator of the flesh. He will correspond to all of the attributes of the flesh. So in the traditional books of Kabbalah, this verse is the basis of all of the symbolism of Kabbalah. That in general, the symbolism of Kabbalah is based upon the limbs of the body, just like we said before. The Hod corresponds to the left kidney or the left leg. As corresponds to the left kidney or the left leg. Netzach to the right, Chokhmah to the right brain, Binah to the left brain. So in general, the symbolism and the metaphors of Kabbalah are based upon the physical body and the physical flesh. And that's the way the verse is interpreted. Mibsari, from my own flesh do I envision God. In Hasidut, the term flesh is understood to mean lev basar, the flesh of the heart. The flesh of the heart is an idiom for all of the attributes, for all of the spiritual attributes of the heart of the Jew. Love, fear, and all of the other attributes. Tiferet itparut is to boast. Netzach means to have trust and hold it. Will now emphasize, especially this evening, that Sefirah of Hod, which is called Hod, has to do with sincerity or simplicity, walking simply and sincerely with God. That's called Hod, the inner emotion of Hod, of thanksgiving. Meaning that a person meditates, looks into his own heart, into his own soul, the attributes of his own soul, and thereby becomes aware and conscious of God. The basic idea is in Hebrew, there are several words for vision, to see. The basic word is lirot, ro'eh. The one prophet who called himself a seer with that word ro'eh, Anochi ro'eh, I am the seer, was Shmuel Hanavi, the prophet Samuel. But all of the other prophets, they're either called a prophet, or the word for seer is not that word ro'eh, the normal word for sight, for seeing, but this word that we're now discussing this evening, the word chazon, choseh, as in the verse mibsari echezeh eloka. What is the difference between lirot and lachazot? Lachazot b'noam Hashem, u'levaker b'eichalo, mibsari echezeh eloka. So we're taught that the difference is that there's direct sight and there's indirect sight. Direct sight is seeing something straight on, face to face. Indirect sight is called seeing something through its backside, observing something through its back. As Moshe Rabbeinu, we know, asked to partake of Hashem's countenance, to see Hashem's face directly, and Hashem said, no, lo yir'ani adam achai, no living creature and being can see my face. V'ra'ita et achorai ufanai lo yera'u, you shall see only my backside, and my face, my countenance, you shall not directly partake of. So what does that mean, seeing the back? We're taught that this word chazon itself is the backside of sight. The word chazon, even though in Hebrew it also appears, as in the beginning of Isaiah, chazon Yeshayahu ben Amos. But in general, the word chazon is the word that's used in the Targum, in the Aramaic translation of the word lirot. And we know a general principle in Kabbalah that every Aramaic translation of a term is the backside of that term as it appears in the Lashon HaKodesh, in the Holy Tongue. Meaning that the relation between these two words of lirot v'lachazot, once more, the concept of a vision, especially a vision that every Jew has in his heart, a vision of redemption, of what will be, can only be until it actually happens, until we actually see Mashiach and see the redemption come, when we see the third temple descend in fire from heaven and actually see it with our own eyes. So we only have the awareness at some inner level of consciousness, very, very deep inside our hearts and inside our souls. And that sight is called chazon. It's called seeing the back side of the phenomenon, not the front side of this phenomenon. And once more, when we say mibsari achazeh elokah, that from my flesh I see God, what does that mean? It means that my flesh itself is a backside impression, stamp of godliness. And to see God through my flesh is to see God's back. Because my flesh is His back. That which He creates in reality, that's His backside. And to see Him through the reality of His own creation, whether it's the creation of my flesh and blood, or even the creation of my inner attributes of the heart, my love of Him and my fear of Him, to see Him through myself, through my own flesh, is seeing Him through His back. That's called V'ra'ita et achura, you shall see my back, and you shall not directly see my face until it actually happens. Ayin lo ra'ata Elokim zulavcha ya'aseh limchakelu. No eye, even the eye of the prophet, of the seer, can directly see the future as it will be until it actually happens. Just for the time being, what we can see with the impression that we can achieve in our hearts is seeing through the back. Now to explain that a little bit more, what does that mean to see a phenomenon through its backside? And that's the meaning of the word vision. But what we've now explained up until now, that the word vision means to see something through its back. It's called chazon. And that's why very often, as we said in the beginning, one sees the vision of a good future sometimes through a bad present. Or as the word Hod itself, this concept of chazon. Chazon is related in the Zohar, as we now explain, to the Sefirah of Hod. About Hod it says, Hodineh ba'chalei mashrit. All destruction and all of death has to do, or sucks, in the terminology of Kabbalah, from the left leg, from the Sefirah of Hod. And nonetheless, in that Sefirah Davka, particularly in that Sefirah, that power of the soul, is the Tkuma, the resurrection, is also through that power, that left leg in the soul. Mibsari achazeh elokah. And that's why we receive the vision of the redemption, the revision of the third temple before the day of destruction. And as Chazal also teaches that on that very day itself of Tisha B'Av of destruction, the Mashiach is born. What does it mean that the Mashiach, the redemption, is born on the day of destruction? It means that his vision, or his imprint on the soul of every Jew, the faith, the strong, eternal faith in the coming of Mashiach, that impression, that stamp, is made on the soul in the very moment of the destruction itself. That he's born in what we can call the super universal consciousness of the Jewish people. The truth of redemption, the truth, the ultimate truth of the coming of Mashiach is born in the very moment of the destruction itself. And once more, a few days before, on the Shabbat before, we say Chazon Yeshayahu, which is, once more, the prophecy is a bad prophecy, the badness, or the bad state of the present. Just at the very last verse of that prophecy of Shabbat Chazon is Sion b'mishpat tipadeh v'shaver b'tzedakah, which is the key. It's relating to us the key of redemption, how redemption will come about. Sion b'mishpat, through justice. Justice is Torah, through commitment to the study and to the performance of the Torah, Tzion b'mishpati padeh v'shaveh, all of those that will turn to Tzion is through the merit of Tzion b'mishpati padeh v'shaveh b'tzedakah, the merit of charity and acts of loving kindness. That's the verse that concludes the Chazon Yeshayahu, that haftarah that we read before Tisha B'Av. So once more, to explain out a little bit more, what does this phenomenon mean? That vision of ultimate good in the present state of being, which is very far, and sometimes appears to be just the opposite of that ultimate good that ultimate utopia that we believe in, that we pray for, and that we actually envision at some level of our hearts. What does that mean? What does it mean to see redemption through its back? That's the meaning of the word chazon and the meaning of the Sefirah of Hod. So what that means, another way of saying that is that to see something directly, face to face, panim b'panim diber Hashem imachem, is to see something out of the context of time altogether. Super temporal. Something which is out of the context of time, as though we see right now, as when it will happen. The third temple will descend in fire from heaven. So that experience, when it will happen, will be something which is super temporal, which is out of time. Whereas to see something happening from its back, one way, or this is the deep way that's explained in Chassidut, means to see something in a state of process. To understand the phenomenon, that the phenomenon is acting itself out and working itself out, and in a state of becoming. It's not in a state of being, but in a state of becoming, which means to comprehend process. That's to see or to relate to a phenomenon through its back. Anything which is process or anything which is evolution, anything which is growth, means that you can see or you can become aware, you can envision what's going to be in the future from the way it is in the present. The Chazal say that when you see a little boy of the age of 3 or 4, if you're wise, you can already tell how he's going to grow up to be. There are many stories about the sages when they were little boys, and the older sages of the generation said, "Mikitve yediale," from he's just a little sprout, he's just beginning to grow. I can already tell how he's going to grow up. To be able to already tell how he's going to grow up when he's big, from seeing him when he's really small, that's seeing the process, or seeing the phenomenon from its back. That's called chazon, that's vision. That's achieving a vision of the future through the experience of the present and how something is going to grow out of the present. And that as much as we, normal people, with normal created consciousness, even Jewish consciousness, can relate to Mashiach and to redemption here and now. And even though we ask for Mashiach immediately, we want Mashiach now, in this very second, the only way we can relate to Mashiach or to redemption is in some way to sense how the future and everything that we're taught about the future. The more that we learn Kabbalah and Chassidus, we're taught tremendous, beautiful, wondrous phenomenon about what the future has in store for us. In general, maybe in the continuation we'll explain it a little bit more. There are at least 5 general levels of elevation, of ascent in the consciousness of the future. There's going to be the first period of the redemption of the Mashiach coming, which is still a period which does not betray or negate the laws of nature, that takes place within nature. Ulam kemin hagun noheg. Then there's a second period of the Mashiach, the messianic era, which is already supernatural, above nature. And then there's a third period afterward, which is that of Tchiyat HaMeitim, of resurrection. It means that death ceases to exist. Death is sucked out, sucked away. Bilah hamavat lanetzach is sucked out of reality. No more death, just eternal life. And Tchiyat HaMeitim mamash. And then there's another level after that, which is called Elef HaShvi'i, the 7th millennium, which is the essential time of receiving the reward of the revelation of all of those mitzvot, all of the good that we did in this world. What actually happened in this world that was hidden from our eyes will become revealed to us in the 7th millennium, which is after the resurrection. This is a whole different period, a whole different dimension. And finally, there's another level which is called 50 Nun Alfei Yovlot, 50,000 of jubilees, which is an expression for infinite elevations, elevation after elevation. And all of these are different levels of consciousness, different worlds altogether, different realities altogether. A physical example for this is, I'm sure that everyone knows in mathematics that when you pass from one dimension to another dimension, let's say from a plane to a cube, from a two-dimensional space to a three-dimensional space. So the previous two-dimensional space, relative to the three-dimensional space, is l'chora of no consequence whatsoever. It's nothing. It's the relation of the one-dimensional space, which is a line to a surface. The line is nothing. A point to a line, the point is nothing. It's zero. Nonetheless, there's some process from which a point becomes a line. The point becomes drawn out to be a line. And there's some subsequent process that a line is drawn out in a different dimension, with a new dimension is added, and the line becomes a surface, a plane. And then there's another process that the plane becomes a cube, becomes a volume, and so forth and so on. If we add the fourth dimension of time to our three-dimensional space, becomes a four-dimensional space, of space and time together. If we add, as in Sefirah of Hod, another dimension, which is called the dimension of good and evil, the moral dimension, so reality becomes five-dimensional, meaning that every point of time and space has an infinite coordinate of depth, of moral depth, versus moral, the opposite of depth, and it's good versus evil. And that's the fifth dimension of Sefirah of Hod, Omek Tov and Omek Ra. And actually, it's possible to extend infinitely. Now, every additional dimension makes, in relation to what was previously present, makes the previous state of reality null. Nonetheless, it's certainly possible this is the physical parable for what we're trying to now explain, that in a lower dimensional space, one can have some awareness or some imagining or some vision of adding an additional dimension to his space altogether. Because that's a simple physical parable for what the word vision and what process means. Whereas you'll never, if we're now in a three-dimensional state of awareness, we can never actually realize what it would be to live in four dimensions. Nonetheless, through studying mathematics itself, you can have some awareness or some vision of what that might mean, four-dimensional space. Or if you're in four-dimensional space, it's called topology, what it might mean to be in five-dimensional space, or in six-dimensional space, and so on and so forth. The secret of vision of dimension, of the vision of redemption, is the ability of the soul to add a new dimension to reality. A new, up until now hidden dimension through faith that this hidden dimension will at some point in time be added to my consciousness of total reality. Because there must be the vision is some bridge. A bridge is also like a state of process. Some bridge out of present confined reality to some infinitely wider and broader reality and consciousness that will reveal itself, will take place in the future. Once more, vision is how to see the future sprout or grow out of the present. And the future will be infinitely wider and infinitely deeper, infinitely more beautiful than the present. And nonetheless, one has no direct hold on the future just through the present. So at this point, we'll now try to explain a little bit why for Hasidim, maybe the most important phenomenon, in order to have a vision of redemption, what we're trying to explain is that one has to have some sense of the future, of this bridge between the confined consciousness of the present and the unconfined, wide and infinite consciousness that we believe in the future. And once more, this consciousness will ever grow. It will grow on at least 5 different levels that we mentioned before in short. There has to be some sign, some signpost, Hatzivilat Tzionim. There has to be some tziyun, some siman in the present of the future to be. Something which is actually tangible. Some tangible reality that you can point at and say this is maybe something like what the future has in store for us. And once more, this is all in order to make it more real, the vision of the future, the vision of redemption. And that for a Chassid is trying to explain that one of the basic foundations of Chassidut, of Hasidism. This is the connection to the tzaddik of the generation, to the Rabbi, that Ipashtuta the Moshe b'chol doro v'doro. And as we know that in every generation there is a person that is potentially, and this is taught in all of the Sfarim HaKadoshim, in every generation there is one who is potentially able to become the Redeemer of the whole Jewish people. But that depends on our merit, that depends on the Eit Ratzon Milamala, that depends on the moment that Hashem will reveal Himself completely to that person who potentially is the all-inclusive Yechidah, the all-inclusive level of Mashiach that actually exists in every Jew. Because why can I have a vision of Mashiach, and why can you have a vision of Mashiach, and every Jew can have a vision, a true vision of Mashiach? Because, as is taught, every Jew has in his heart a point, a spark of Mashiach. The leader of every generation is the total, all-inclusive state consciousness of all of those sparks of Mashiach that every Jew has in his heart. That's why everyone certainly can and should and must. It's an actual requirement to think and try to think ahead. Once more, to sweeten or to heal the present through the vision of the future. The vision of the future is a healing element for the present, and through all of Jewish history. Because all of Jewish history, the present was not always nice. And just the opposite. And that power, which for thousands and thousands of years has healed all of the wounds of the present, is this vision of redemption, the vision of Mashiach, the faith in Mashiach, and once with the actual experience, as it were, of the process taking place. In order to help that vision, once more this vision, all state of Achorayim, it's all called the back sight. Seeing through the back, the thing which most, the truth or phenomenon that most helps that vision reveal itself in the Jewish heart is the tzaddik of the generation. Even the vision of the third temple, it says in many places, is related to the Mikdash Ma'at, to the smaller miniature temple, which is the house of prayer and the house of learning of the tzaddik of the generation. There's many great tzaddikim, like Rabbi Vitebsk and other stories of great tzaddikim, Talmidei Baal Shem Tov, that said in their own house, or their own Daled Amot, their own Bet Midrash, which is a Mikdash Mat, a small tabernacle, a small temple, the air of redemption, the spirit of Mashiach, and the final temple already is dwelling and resting in their home. Meaning that he himself, that tzaddik himself, is some way a tree of the future that's implanted in the present, in the state of the present, helping us go out of the present into the future. There's one of the famous stories of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, in the Zion Betters, the seven beggar story, that maybe most of us are familiar with. That there in one of the days, in the fifth day, he talks about a beggar, the fifth beggar, who was a hunchback. And in short, the purpose of this beggar was to take the whole generation, the whole Jewish people, and as it were, this is the symbol, the idiom, to put what the power of his back was to lift up the total consciousness and vision of his generation to a higher space, a higher dimension altogether. As we're now saying, how can one transcend the confinement of a certain space that he's in? In that story, everybody was looking for the way to paradise, the way to utopia. And every different direction was not it. And the reason that every different direction that people can conceive of in this world is not the true direction to redemption, to paradise, is because the true dimension is a coordinate in a different dimension, in a different space altogether. So long as you're confined, as we're confined in a certain space, no matter what direction we'll choose, it won't be the direction. Because the direction is out of this space altogether. And there's a certain tzaddik that can give that awareness to all of the generation. That in order to reach redemption, one has to transcend that space, that universe of consciousness that we're presently in. And so once more, to envision that is to envision 4 dimensions from 3 dimensions. Which is very, very difficult, but a Jew has that power someplace deep in his heart. And once more, that person who helps him envision that transcendence is the tzaddik or the Rebbe of the generation, who is once more a part of the future that's implanted in the present. And if God wills, and if we merit, then as it says in all of the Sfarim, every generation has a potential Mashiach who's still living the present. But the Spirit descends from above and reveals itself to him, and once more, as we said, he is the all-inclusive Yechidah, sparks of all of our sparks, all of our individual sparks of Mashiach. Then he can actually become the Mashiach, and he can take us up and out to a different space altogether. which is a space of redemption. Now, up until now, the idea, the point that we've expressed is that Chazon vision is in a certain way paradoxical, because the present is not the future, and nonetheless, the only way that we can reach the future, most part to reach something, is process, and process is back. The only way we can reach the future is through coming to grips and acknowledging the present in a certain way. So now let's get back to what we explained in the beginning, that this concept of vision corresponds to the Sefirah of Hod in Kabbalah. Now Hod has many meanings. Hod means to acknowledge. It means to acknowledge something that I can't fathom, I can't comprehend, something which is totally above my comprehension. Above my comprehension. Modim chachamim l'Rebbeir. Lo amdu chachamim al sof da'ato shel Reb Meir. The chachamim were not able to delve into the depths of the insight and the wisdom of Reb Meir. Nonetheless, they acknowledged his correctness. But sometimes you acknowledge something which you can't actually fathom yourself, but you have some sense of its truth, of its inherent truth. That's one meaning of modeh, of Hod, to acknowledge. Another meaning of modeh is to give thanks. To give thanks for goodness, for benevolence. Either that another person was benevolent to you in this world. As it says, we're taught in Sefirah of Hod that if a person is not able to express gratitude, to feel gratitude and thanks between people, ben adam l'chaviro, it doesn't experience a gift being given to him, and is not able to say thank you from all of his heart, so he has no gateway. In Jewish literature, it's chovot halavavot, that this is one of the basic points that he makes, that the beginning of relation to God is only through thanks. Being able to thank God for every breath, for waking up in the morning. And the only way to be able to thank God is if a person experiences this between man and his fellow man. If a person is kafui tova, he doesn't experience gift, and he isn't able to express thanks, he has no rapport, no gateway whatsoever to our world. So there's also the simple meaning of the word Hod, to express thanks. To express thanks for the life of the present, no matter what the state of the present is. If we're breathing, we're alive, we're all sitting here together, Baruch Hashem, thank God. But something about being able, no matter what the state of being is, to be able to thank God for the life of the present moment. That's the one meaning of the word Hod, which is a sister meaning, a companion meaning of acknowledging a future, because Hod means to acknowledge a future which is incomprehensible. And together with that, the sister meaning of the very same word means to simply express thanks for the life and for all of the benevolence of God to us, the kindness of God to us in the present, in this moment itself. Then there's even a third meaning of the word Hod. The word Hod means to confess sin. Rasha Todah. Very often the judge in a court, in Chazal, would turn to the Rasha and say to him, Rasha Todah, confess. The very same word Todah means to confess sin. What does it mean to confess an Avirah? We're talking about the Avirah, sin, is from the same word as Avar, which means past, the experience of the past. And the consciousness of every Jew should be that the past, everything that I did, even my good deeds, all of my past, in relation to what the present should be, and certainly what the future should be, my service of God, my service of Hashem, all of the past is an Avirah. The totality of Avar, of the past is Avirah. The first sage that expresses explicitly is Rabbi that said that every day a person has to do tshuva for yesterday. No matter how good yesterday was, how many mitzvot and how much Torah you know yesterday, you have to know and meditate on the fact that my consciousness of God yesterday was confined, finite. And it was so confined, there's even a very famous story they told about this. That once he visited, he was on a trip, and someone was so hospitable as to take him into his house and to give him all that he needed, his food and drink and sleep, everything. And he didn't know, the host didn't know that this was Rabbeinu Sadigon. And when Rabbeinu Sadigon left, well, they actually left the house, and it was a few kilometers away, so it became known to the host that you know who your guest was. Your guest was Rabbeinu Sadigon. So his heart fell, and a total fall of heart. That had I known who that guest was, that this was Rabbeinu Sadigon, how would I have treated him? I would have treated him 1,000 times more. And so what he actually did, this host, he ran after Rabbeinu Sadigon until he reached him, and he fell on his face. And he started to confess, to say, to ask for forgiveness, to forgive me for not treating you properly. And so the Bible said, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? You treated me wonderfully. Great. He said, what do you mean? But you're Rabbeinu Sadigon. If I had known who you were, then I should have treated you 1,000 times more, over. So after this story happened, Rabbeinu Sadigon writes that he himself had a tremendous arousement from the story that took place. And he said that this is exactly the way one should feel day by day in one's life. In relation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, no matter what I did for you yesterday, I didn't know who you were. And had I known who you were, how infinitely more should I have done for you? And that's called the continual tshuva, day after day. That yesterday I didn't know who you were. That tshuva makes the past continuously into an avirah. And once more, the Hod, in reference to the past, is this confession, just like that host that ran after Rabbeinu Sadigon and fell on his face and confessed and asked for forgiveness for not treating you properly, had I known who you were. So once more we see that the same word Hod has three different senses to it that all has to do with process from past to present to future. And they're all interdependent. Because Hod is a consciousness of the past, that the past, the response of the soul to the past is that of confession. That's tshuva. That's the continual tshuva from day to day. Whereas in relation to the present one must acknowledge and thank God for the breath, for the life of the present moment, for the opportunity to serve Him as I know Him now, in this present moment. And from that comes the third level of Hod, is the acknowledgement, this sense of the infinite future, which is once more a multi-dimensional space that I have no direct way to comprehend. I can't see its face, I can just see its back. And once more, seeing its back is seeing the process. In the future, it says, in this world, there are 6 commandments, or the 613 commandments that are continual, according to the Rabbi. They are loving Hashem and fearing Hashem and believing in the unity of Hashem and believing in Hashem's existence and not worshipping idolatry and not going after one's evil thoughts and lusts. Those are the 6 continuous commandments of the Torah. And it says that when Mashiach will come, there's also a vision of the future, a vision of redemption. When Mashiach will come, there will be other of the mitzvot which will become continual. And the very first one of the mitzvot which must become continual is explained as the mitzvah of tshuva. That in this world, tshuva is relative. The person that he knows that he did something wrong, so he's required, he's demanded in the Torah to do tshuva. But actually, tshuva can be a continual process. Because this tshuva, Rabbeinu Sadi Gaon, that the past, the consciousness of the past, no matter what it is an Avera that itself becomes the springboard for our ever higher present and future, which for the springboard to spring out of a previous state, a previous space of dimensions into a higher dimensional space, is because of the tshuva in relation to the past. This is called Kol Yamav Tshuva. This is the idea that Mashiach first comes to make the tzaddikim do tshuva. Not to make the Rishonim do tshuva. The Rishonim don't have to do tshuva even now. That's no chidush. The chidush, the novelty of the future, is that the Mashiach impresses upon the heart of the tzaddikim that a tzaddik also has to continually be doing tshuva. Because his past consciousness itself is an avera in relation to what the consciousness now should be, and certainly in the future should be. So that's called that the mitzvah of tshuva becomes a continual mitzvah in the future. And there's another mitzvah that becomes continual, and that's the mitzvah of Torah. Now in this world, Torah is also, it's not every second as one learns Torah. Even though you should learn Torah as much as possible. It's not a continual second by second performance of the mitzvah. Whereas, in the future, it says that every Jew will enter into a state which is called Nevi'at HaEnso, that new insight will flow into his consciousness continuously, just as a stream of water ever flows into consciousness. Nachal Novea Mekor Chochmah. And this is called Torah Chadasha Me'iti Teitzei. A new Torah will come out of me and flow into the souls, and the heart, and the mouths of every Jew in the future. This has to do with the knot of the spring, or the fountain that flows out of the Holy of Holies of the third temple, as described in some length by the prophet Yitzchak at the end of his Nebuah, and also mentioned in some of the other prophets. And then finally, there's a third mitzvah which will become continual in the future. That's the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem. As it were, of one's life being offered up completely and totally to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. These 3 mitzvot that we set up until now are actually corresponding to the first 3 levels of elevation. As we said, that one enters into a process of ascent, that process goes on infinitely. There are at least 5 stages to that we mentioned before. The first stage of Mashiach coming, which is still in nature. It's just that nature will become good. What the first promise, the first utopian vision of redemption is that nature will be good to us. There's no reason why nature should not be good, should not show a goodly face to the Jewish people, to all of the world. What does it mean that nature will be good? There will be no suffering in the world. None of the levels of life and reality will there be suffering at all. To reach such a state of no suffering, that everyone will feel good, and will feel good, will know, also conscious where that good feeling is coming from. That good feeling is deriving from the temple site, from a Jewish people, with a Jewish king, with Mashiach. And that's eliminating all static and all disturbance all psychic disturbance. Where does suffering begin from? Suffering begins from psychic disturbance in the heart, in the soul. When there will be a Jewish king, there's also the very, very first thing that we have to think of, a Jewish king, which is a Mashiach figure. That all of the Jewish people accepts him, and then the world accepts him. In a certain way, the first thing that does, the first effect that has, it has to purify the air outside and the air inside from all disturbance, all static and all friction, which is actually the basis of all suffering in this world. And all this disturbance, all this foreign disturbance of the world, now the world is 99% disturbance. Just open up the radio, almost any channel, even our root channel, and you hear static. That's the static of the world. And the first thing that happens when Mashiach comes is that all of the radio channels, it's all a different scene, a different vibration. This is the number one thing that happens at the beginning of redemption. That the air of this world is pure, almost 99.99% static. And that's the origin of disturbance in the soul, of all suffering throughout the world. A Jewish king, Mashiach, coming is a purification of the air and a purification of the inner air. And then nature itself behaves properly. Then we have nothing against nature. Just the opposite. Hashem created nature. Nature was created perfect. It was created fine. It was created to give just what every being needs. All of its needs. Its inner spiritual needs, its outer physical needs. This is number one thing that happens when redemption, which means Mashiach comes about. This is called the Tikkun of Nefesh. As these 5 elevations of Mashiach's coming correspond themselves to the 5 levels of the soul. In order for that to happen, the Jewish people and the whole world has to do tshuva. La'alta li tshuva, la'alta li gula. Now the Rabbi is saying that maybe we've already done the tshuva, but nonetheless there's still something we have to want Mashiach. Even though maybe we've done tshuva for avirot, for gross avirot. But the tshuva to open up ourselves to redemption, that has not yet happened. We have to ourselves become open, to open as much as we can, bitchudi pedach and bitchosher machat, to open up even a little opening like the opening of a needle, and then Hashem promises that I will open up to you a large, infinite opening as that of the Ulam HaGadol. So some opening of our own hearts and our own souls still is required from us. To open ourselves up to Mashiach. This is the Tikkun of Nefesh, and this has to do with the first level of the messianic period. It's the whole vidui of the Alvaros coming into a state of this continual tshuva that we mentioned now from Rabbeinu Sadi Go. The effect that has on the world, it reveals the inherent goodness of nature itself, and it eliminates suffering from the world. That's step number 1. Step number 2, and I'll just try to say in short, because the further we get on, the less we can conceive of it. Now, the Bible can conceive even of step number 1, the Tikkun of Nefesh, the Tikkun of Ruach, the second stage, or the second era of Mashiach, when the Ga'al Zev Im Keves is read literally, that the lamb and the wolf will actually live together, which it's part of nature, but it's already supernatural. The nature begins to change. That's step number 2. And step number 2 is what the second period of Mashiach, called the supernatural, or the miraculous epic of Mashiach, then nature actually so changes. It's actually a metamorphosis, a total metamorphosis of nature is resurrection. Resurrection is the antithesis of nature. Resurrection is the negation of death, and it's the resurrection of the dead that come back to life. That's Nisei Nisim. The second level of the Ga'ar Zevin Keves, the peace becomes innate between all the forces in nature. That has to do with the flow of Torah in the present. With the mitzvah of Talmud Torah becoming a continuous experience in the soul. The secret of resurrection has to do with the third mitzvah, the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem v'Nichtarti, B'tov B'nei Yisrael, that as it were, giving up one's life for Hashem becomes the case. And even though this itself appears to be paradoxical, that continual giving up of one's life for Hashem, that itself is the secret, what's called the Tal, the dew of resurrection. As we know that when the Torah itself was given, on every utterance of Hashem, the soul left the body, and returned to the body through Tal Tchiyah. Meaning that there's something above the Torah itself, there's the consciousness of Torah, that's the Ruach Tichlaut, and there's something which is above, which hovers above the consciousness of Torah, which is Parchan Nishmatam, that the soul leaves the body and is returned simultaneously, instantaneously, returned through the dew of Tchiyah, which is the dew, the Tal Torah. That's the third continuous mitzvah. And then afterwards, there's a level that all of the mitzvot become totally revealed. That's the Erev HaShvi'i. All of the infinite light. And these are infinite dimensions. All of the infinite light of everything that was done in all of the levels of this world, up until the redemption and up until the resurrection itself, it all becomes totally revealed. And even after it all becomes revealed, then there are still 50,000 jubilees above that. Above the total redemption, the total revelation of all of the mitzvot, all of the good of this existence, of this universe, this space that we're in. So once more, this is all the secret of vision. The vision of redemption means the ability through the back to grow, to see the present. To see the present has its good side and has its bad side. How can redemption grow out of the bad side of the present? Through tshuva. There have to be two things, two pillars, or two signposts that a person has in front of him to gain some vision of the future. He has to have some awareness of the possibility that the whole world is going to do tshuva. He has to have someone in front of him, just like we said before, that in order to have an awareness that the future is going to grow out of the present. Like Modim Chachamim Rabbi, you have to have some great tzaddik who he is a impression of the future in the present. In order to be aware, to have a feeling of the tshuva of the whole world, that the whole world is going to do tshuva, so a person also has to have some stereotype about tshuva also in his consciousness, in his mind. And who that should be, that should actually be me, myself. Because if we're all sitting here in this room, it means that for some reason all of us came into this shul. It means that we're not just hefkerging in the Shalom Shalom and Doveras Yiddish, because we could be having a good time with our someplace else. For some reason, everybody came here this evening. And the reason that everybody came here this evening, deep in his heart, is because everybody wants some vision of redemption. And everybody at some level, most of them, I'm sure that if not 100% of all people here, are all what are called Baalei Tshuva. I myself, as each one of us ourselves, has to in some way realize, meaning make real and conscious that tshuva is a reality. Just like I did tshuva to even a certain very, very small extent. even the most minute little bit of tshuva that I did. This is called the secret of the Kudat Tova that Rabbi talks about in the Beit and Kutei Maran, whoever is familiar with that. And even if I just did one little drop of tshuva, that itself is an example, not only that I can do tshuva, but that the whole world can do tshuva. But if I did it, if I came here, so everybody else can also come here. And everybody else should come here. And everybody else will. At a certain point, everybody will come here. But that person has to think of that. Od ma'at has to just emphasize that point that the tshuva is a reality. And the more that little drop of tshuva that a person can experience in his own heart, that I want God, and I want Mashiach, and I want redemption, that has to be emphasized, and that has to be expanded. So once more, if the present is a mixture of good and evil, the future is all good. How can all good come out of good and evil? Once more, the good can naturally, as it were, develop into an even greater good. The evil has to do tshuva. For each one of those two sides of the picture, sides of reality, a person has to have some image. Good becoming infinite good, the image of that is the tzaddik ador. And the fact that evil itself can become good and can do tshuva, the whole world can do tshuva, will do tshuva, and will open up its heart to Hashem, that should be, a person should find that in his own heart. And through this duality, as it were, these two poles of what's going to become out of the good and what's going to become out of the evil, through that and through the balance, the proper balance between those two poles, a person can gain some sight or some vision, once more, some backside awareness of redemption. Okay. Comments?
I was wondering if you could comment on three things in relation to the structure. Mentions that not every generation.
Let's take one by one, so I'll forget the first thing.
Yeah.
So say the first thing.
Okay. On the three wells of Yitzchak, the Ramban, it seems to, he says that the three wells are the three Batei Mikdash, and the third one called Rehovot won't be built till everyone agrees, implying that somehow there'll be some sort of international peace or agreement as to the Torah before the Mikdash is built.
Okay.
If you could relate that to
That's a
us.
very good question. And this question is actually related to Parashat Shavua. Actually, this very thing I was distinctly mentioning, the time is already over. But there are three wells that Yitzchak or his servants dig in this Parashat Toldot. The first is called Yitzchak, the second is called Sitna, the third is called Rehovot. The first two have to do with quarreling. Yitzchak means to quarrel, and Sitna means hatred. And the Torah says the reason that the first two have to do with quarreling is because there was no consensus as to the ownership of these two first Beirut wells, and there was a quarrel, a continuous quarrel going on between Yitzchak and Abimelech, the Plishtim, the inhabitants of the land. Now the Ramban says that these three wells correspond to the three temples. That the first temple is called Yitzchak, and the second temple is called Sitna. There are actually verses that he brings, verses from the Torah, from Sefirah of Hod, that make it very clear that these words are actually related to the first temple and the second temple, Yitzchak and Sitna. And then afterwards it says, Vayatek Misham, Vayachpor Be'er Acheret, that Yitzchak left that place, Vayatek Misham, it says, that he was first in a certain space, just like what we were talking about before. In a certain space, a certain headspace, a certain universe of consciousness. And in that universe that he was in, there was quarreling going on between the Palestinians there and between the Jews as to who it belongs to. And it was Asek and Sitna. And so what had to happen afterwards? It says, Yatek Misham. Yatek is from the word Atik Yomin, the ancient one. It has the Kabbalah, it's called Pnimiyut HaKever. Chassidut is called Or Chadash. It's a revelation of a light which was not even revealed before that Tzimtzum HaRishon explained Barichut in the Chassidut. There's some great new light of consciousness is revealed. There's a completely different dimension as from before. Vayatek Misham, and after Vayatek Misham, after he completely transcended his previous space of being, Vayachpor Beracheret, he says that then he dug another well, V'lo Ravu Aleh, they didn't quarrel over that, Vayikrash Marachovot, Lemor, Ki Atayah Chiva Shekanu Farinu Ba'aret, and he called that well, that final well, breath, infinite breath, Rechovot, saying that now Hashem is widened up. This Vayatek Misham, there's no more quarreling. There's true consensus. So this can be for one of several reasons. Either the previous quarreling, which was based on lower levels of consciousness, levels that had friction and static and disturbances in it, as we were mentioning before. So that's all of this Palestinian static on the radio station. It's all deceit, but it's there. That's unfortunately the way things look, the way things are. So certainly we have to reach a level that this static disappears. Vayatek Misham v'lo ravu aleh. So how does that actually take place? So this is exactly what we were trying to say before, that to purify the air from static and from quarreling, and to reach consensus, not only consensus between the Jewish people and the other peoples, but as we know, the basic problem is actually in the Jewish people itself. This is what the Rambam explained explicitly in Moreh Nevuchim. He says the purpose of the king is to unify the opinions of all of the people of his generation, which is to remove, to nullify all of this static in the air. That is explicitly explained by the Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim. That's why the Halakha said, and the Rambam himself paskins at the end of the whole Plagim, that the temple cannot be built without a king. Because a king appears, and then a king fights wars, whether it's physical wars or spiritual wars, but he has some work to do in order to purify all of the nations of the earth, was to be able to come to consensus, and this through the power but also through the goodness of the king. Because the king is a symbol of power, he's also a symbol of ultimate goodness. And that's why there must be a king before there can be a temple. This once more, the Rambam explicitly says that the reason that a king must be before a temple is because if there wouldn't be a king, even the Jewish people would not agree as to where the temple should be built and everything that has to do with the temple, who should build it, who should serve there. This is what the Rambam says, that the Jewish people would never agree on anything that has to do with the temple if there's not a figure above, at the head of the people, who is the king. And for the very same reason, even more so, certainly the other nations of the earth, of the world, and the Jewish people will never come together if there is not a true king of Israel. So that's number one.
Next, if you could relate your theoretical structure.
Somebody else wants to
Yeah, maybe there's some other. Okay, just this one. Just finish this if you want. If you don't want to answer it, as someone else. But could you relate your theoretical structure to what's actually happening today, like the Iraq War, the Peace Conference, all the Gentile tourists and Sukkot pilgrimage and things like that? And would you say the Abarbanel is wrong then in rejecting the Rambam's notion that the king is a good thing?
Could you comment, as you're saying, Hod is the idea of the vision of the future based on the present, on the idea of Yehuda being the essential, the embodiment of the people who can give thanks, referring to Hanukkah as Yehuda approaches Yosef. The idea of the tikkun of the left leg of the chef, right? The damage that was done, and the tikkun that is eventually enacted by Yehuda approaching Yosef and the story that comes from. Like Hanukkah, we tell on Hanukkah.
You said the Hanukkah certainly has to do with the Hanukkah. The Baal Shem Tov said the Hanukkah is the holiday of Mashiach. The Purim is the holiday of resurrection. The two holidays of the Rabbanan, Hanukkah and Purim, are Yemot HaMashiach and Tchiyat HaMetim. So everything that has to do with Mashiach's coming, the Mashiach, when Mashiach will come, he will have a violin, a kinnor. What is violin not? He will have a kinnor of 8 strings, which correspond to the 8 candles of Hanukkah. In this world, there are only 7 strings. You need to be able to sing, to express in song, a dimension which is unexpressible in this world. That's called the Shir Chadash. It says even now, when you look at the Hanukkah candles, you're supposed to hear the story and hear the song of each candle. Each candle is telling its story, each candle is singing its song. When the Shir will come, there will be a totally new dimension of expression. And the Shir is light.